You know how when a genre gets popular, and the naming schemes for things starts getting a little out of hand? Well, while that works for a majority of things, you often end up missing out on hidden gems solely because the name of it either drives you off or makes it feel boring. In the worst circumstances, they even make you avoid them because it feels like the title alone is telling you way too much about the series. Today, we're going to be talking about one of those animes. My Isekai Life, I gained a second character class and became the strongest sage in the world, is one of the worst titles I've seen, and it's sad that it had to be that way considering the anime itself is pretty damn great. The protagonist comes into this world like other healing type isekais. He worked himself to death. This one is a little different though, as it seems that it's more because of the work environment than just upper management taking advantage of him. While that is the backstory of how Yuji came to this world, the anime starts off without a setup to it. With it being handled this way, it feels more natural than when you're introduced to the character after their death. There's been some time since he's woken up here, so there's none wasted getting to know stuff that would be unnecessary for this kind of story. One of the first things you'll notice is that this anime is very blatantly wish fulfillment. Because of this fact, Yuji himself is a pretty strong character. Don't let that deter you from watching though, as this is handled in a way that probably differs from what you're used to. He doesn't appear to be too strong overall, and it's all because of how he uses his spells. His tamed beasts have significantly lesser power compared to him, and he channels that to make himself be seen as relatively normal. The worst it really does is that he seems to be a unique class of tamer to the residents of this world. Yuji essentially has applied a handicap to himself for the entire anime, with the exception of when he really needs to let loose, of course. This is one aspect of the series that I really enjoy, and it makes some parts of this refreshing when you're someone like me who has watched just about every isekai that there is. The story is not the strongest aspect of this series, but it really complements things in tandem with the best part of it, but I'll be going on about that in a bit more detail later. The main plot of this anime follows our protagonist while he's trying to have a normal life as an adventurer, but he ends up moving on to the next town because they find out how strong he really is. The first few episodes can be boiled down to this pattern, and because of that they can feel repetitive, but it doesn't stay this way for long, and if you didn't get scared off by this point, you'll likely enjoy the rest the series has to offer. As with many other kinds of isekai like this, you'd be disappointed if you came here expecting dire stakes. The protagonist does have a harder time here and there, but it's never something too bad. This can be seen as a bad thing to some people, but it's perfectly reasonable with what the objective of the series is. While some people might find other parts of the series to be subpar and possibly even uninteresting, I find it's really tough for me to see it that way. Sure, when isolated, its elements might not sound that great, but it's all brought together very well through Yuji. The way it's written, the framing of it, the visuals. This series is something that's had me impressed from its first episode. My Isekai Life has one of the most consistent writing I've ever seen in a series, and what keeps it held together so well is Yuji's backstory. It's not a particularly deep one, and there aren't many scenes involving it, but its influence is tightly wrapped around the plot of the story itself. Yuji's previous life is a prime example of perfect visual storytelling. From watching the scenes they show, you can tell everything you need to know about it and how it's affected him without him even needing to tell you himself. The scenes are all washed out in color, animated in a low frame rate, and even takes up a completely different art style where every piece of that shows so much of his soul without uttering a single word. My Isekai Life might come off as generic to some, but it's anything but that. It's a series that should be watched despite it seeming like it wouldn't be anything special. This anime is a textbook example on how appearances can be deceiving. If anything about this video caught your interest, I urge you to go and watch this series yourself. It deserves more attention because it's one of those series that would get unfairly treated just because of the stigma that isekai gets in the West. Give it a chance and tell me what you think of it. I'd love to know your thoughts.